My take on the Nolan Wells case, Bart did it. Now, this is allegedly, but I believe that Bart did it. I believe that Bart had some type of relationship with Katie. Katie was obviously with Nolan. Bart had a jealous rage seeing a young black male with a white female. We know in states like Mississippi, I see it all the time in my community, where white guys get jealous to see black guys with white girls. I've seen it a million times, and people who deny this are flat out lying. I believe what happened was that Bart put Nolan in a chokehold, and he didn't realize his own strength, and Nolan did not wake up. Hence the reason why we hear in the background of the CTO call, we hear, "Damn it, Bart, Nolan, wake the fuck up, is he dead?" All this is allegedly now. Well, if he just accidentally killed him, then why wouldn't they bring him to the police? Because Bart has so much to lose. He was the star football player on his way to the NFL. A manslaughter charge, whether it's involuntary or voluntary or a negligent homicide, is not going to look well on his resume and would obviously disqualify him from his NFL career. Because of his football stardom, and apparently he has a family with the same pedigree, he has clout around town enough to get people to remain silent, enough to help construct an alibi, and also put the fear of God in these kids. Tell them that you're also going to be implicated in this, and we're all going to go down. We're all going to be arrested. Also, why they tried to place Bart not at the scene initially. Now, they went on a speaking tour. Warren did the most talking, and listening to him talk with Officer Tatum, he almost did too much talking and told on the crew. Warren says that when they got the boat back, that he went upstairs to talk to the father of one of the kids rather than hanging out with everybody downstairs. He says that they were talking about boats up there. Now, why would you even bring this up? Like, why would this even be a part of the story if it was such an innocuous thing that you were just going upstairs to randomly talk to a father about boats? The reality is because they weren't talking about boats. They were constructing an alibi and a cover story. And when they came downstairs, it was automatically like, oh, what happened to Nolan? Where is Nolan? Has anybody seen Nolan? Let's call the Coast Guard. Why would they call CITO? Why would they call the Coast Guard? Because it creates a timeline. It creates like a paper trail of where they could have been anywhere but with Nolan. Also, why would you call the Coast Guard if you truly believe that Nolan just was behind with the girl Katie? Even if Katie had came back at that point, why wouldn't you think he's off with some other girl or doing something else? Why would you think something nefarious happened? Why? Because you had his phone and you knew that something nefarious happened. Again, this is allegedly. Let's smoke them out. What doesn't come out in a wash always comes out in a rinse.
Bart Edmonson Jr. just lawyered up. He's hiring TMZ to release a statement. He's denying the Katie rumors. He's threatening lawsuits against anyone who says otherwise. And he got a credible death threat. But here's what's actually important. His denial just opened a much bigger hole in the entire case. Because if Bart didn't fight Nolan over Katie, if Bart never even knew Katie existed, then every single friend's motive just got questioned. And the timeline of what actually happened that day just became even more impossible to explain. He says the viral photo everyone thought showed him with Katie doesn't show Katie at all. He says he never dated Katie. He says he didn't even know who Katie was until after Nolan died. He says he's suing anybody who says otherwise, and he got a credible death threat because of it. Now, Bart's official statement came through his attorney Russell Latino, and it says 3 things. 1, that picture doesn't show Katie. 2, he never dated Katie. 3, he didn't kill Nolan or contribute to his death in any way. He says he was just helping a boat in distress and fully cooperated with investigators. That's his claim. But here's where it gets interesting. Because Bart also denied something else. On Instagram, in the comments, Bart said he wasn't even in Pass Christian on July 4th. He said he lives in Wyoming and hasn't been in Pass Christian for over a year. He said he wasn't at the pool party. He said he lives in Wyoming. But wait. If Bart wasn't in Pass Christian, if Bart was in Wyoming, then how is Bart's boat GPS data being pulled by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources? How is Bart's boat involved in the distress call if he wasn't even there? How is Bart's name mentioned in the CITO recording? Because multiple investigators and analysts have confirmed they heard Bart's name on that tape. Multiple people have said they heard voices calling out different names on that distress call, and Bart's name was one of them. So either Bart is lying about being in Wyoming, or Bart's boat was used without him being present. Or Bart is lying about not being there and his Wyoming story is completely fabricated. Take your pick. All three options point to deception. Now, someone on Instagram tried to explain this away. They said Bart was responding to a comment about a pool party on the 27th of June, not July 4th. They said Pass Christian and Ocean Springs are 45 minutes apart, so Bart wasn't denying being there on July 4th, he was denying being at a pool party on June 27th, but that's not what Bart said. Bart said he hasn't been in Pass Christian for over a year. Over a year. That's not just about one pool party. That's not just about July 4th. Over a year, which means Bart is either lying about his entire movement history or his timeline is completely different from what everyone else is claiming. And if Bart is lying about when he was in Pass Christian, what else is he lying about? What else has been hidden? What other timeline is false? Subscribe right now, because what we're about to walk through is going to change how you read this entire case. Now let's talk about the boats, because this is where the story completely falls apart. According to Bart's statement, he towed a boat 3 miles. He wasn't on his own boat. He was on Wyatt's boat. He boarded the sinking vessel, which was Wyatt's boat. He says he helped with a distress situation and then left. That's his version. So there's Bart's boat. There's Wyatt's boat. But according to the GPS data, according to multiple people's accounts, according to the investigation records, there was a third boat. Nobody knows who that boat belonged to. Nobody knows who was operating it. Nobody knows who was on it. Nobody has explained where it came from or where it went. The third boat is missing from every narrative. It's missing from every explanation. It's missing from every official statement. But it exists in the GPS data. It exists in the timeline. It exists in the evidence. Now, Warren's story says he went out on one boat and came back on a different boat. That matches the boat count. He left on one, returned on another. Wyatt presumably stayed with his boat or was involved in the towing situation. That also matches. Bart says he towed a boat and helped with a distress call. That's 3 boats accounted for. But Nolan went out on one boat. According to everybody's account, according to every statement, according to every narrative, he never came back on anything. He never returned. He's the only person who went out and didn't come back. He's the only one who disappeared. He's the only one whose fate is still being investigated. So the question becomes, which boat was Nolan on? Was he on Bart's boat being towed? Was he on Wyatt's boat that supposedly sank and needed rescue? Was he on the third boat that nobody's explained? And more importantly, why did he not come back on any of them? Here's the thing that nobody has answered. Not Bart, not Warren, not Wyatt, not Katie, not any of them. If Bart wasn't fighting Nolan over Katie, if there was no jealous rage, if Bart never even knew who Katie was, then what was the actual reason these boats were out there? What was the real purpose of July 4th? Because the official story is that a boat sank and needed rescue. But the GPS data shows something completely different. It shows a boat leaving Horn Island at 4:31 p.m. It shows that boat moving at walking speed, barely 5 knots, for 53 consecutive minutes. That's not an emergency. That's not a crisis response. A boat in actual distress accelerates. A boat taking on water moves toward shore fast, but this boat, it drifted. It moved methodically. It took its time, and then at 5:24 p.m., suddenly, urgency appeared. Suddenly the boat accelerated to 35 knots, full speed. That's when panic set in. That's when whatever happened reached a critical point. That's when Nolan's story changed completely. And if Bart's denying everything, if Bart's saying he was just helping with a distress call, if Bart's claiming he fully cooperated with investigators, then why did he lawyer up? Why did he go to TMZ? Why the public statement? Why the aggressive response? Why the threats? Because innocent people don't do that. Innocent people answer questions directly. They don't hire attorneys to issue press releases through tabloid media. They don't threaten lawsuits against random people on social media. They don't claim credible death threats. That's what people do when they're protecting something. That's what people do when they're scared. That's what people do when they know something doesn't add up, and they're terrified of what happens if the truth comes out. Now, let's talk about what Bart hasn't answered. Not in his statement, not in any interview, not anywhere public. He hasn't said when he last saw Nolan. He hasn't said what boat Nolan was on. He hasn't said whether he saw Nolan on the island that day. He hasn't said whether he saw Nolan on any boat. He hasn't addressed the audio where his name appears to be mentioned on the distress call. He hasn't explained the third boat. He hasn't explained why his timeline contradicts what he told police. He's only addressed the Katie rumors, and he's done it aggressively. He's threatening lawsuits. He's claiming death threats. He's using TMZ. He's using his attorney. He's going public, but he's not answering the actual questions, the ones that matter, the ones that would explain why Nolan is dead. Because here's what we know for certain. Nolan Wells went out on at least one boat. 3 friends came back. Nolan didn't. Katie says Nolan told her he was leaving with his friends. The friends say Nolan wanted to stay with Katie. The audio suggests multiple people on a boat discussing whether someone is alive or dead. And now Bart is saying he doesn't know Katie, he wasn't fighting over a girl, he was just helping with a sinking boat. But if Bart wasn't involved in any conflict, if Bart was just being helpful, if Bart wasn't motivated by jealousy or romance, then what happened to Nolan? Because Bart's denial doesn't explain Nolan's death. It makes it worse. It eliminates one possible motive and leaves everything else unanswered. It raises more questions than it answers. The 3 boats matter. The third boat is the real question. Because if Bart had his boat, if Wyatt had his boat, if Warren was on one of them, then whose boat was the third one? Who was piloting it? Where did it go? And was Nolan on it? Because if Nolan was on the third boat, if the third boat wasn't accounted for, if nobody's talking about the third boat, then that's where the answer is. That's where Nolan's final hours lie. That's where the truth is buried. And here's what really matters. Bart got a credible death threat. Think about that. A death threat. Who sent that threat? Who was so threatened by Bart's statement that they felt the need to send a death threat? Was it someone protecting their own story? Was it someone who knows Bart's lying? Was it someone who knows what really happened and doesn't want Bart talking to lawyers or investigators? Because credible death threats don't come from nowhere. They come from people who are scared, people who are desperate, people who are panicking, people who know something, and they want it to stay hidden. And here's the most important question Bart's statement raises. If he wasn't involved in any jealous conflict over Katie, if his entire motive is gone, if that whole theory collapses, then what actually happened? Because motives matter in murder investigations. Jealousy is a clear motive. A love triangle gone wrong is a clear motive. But if there's no love triangle, if Bart never even knew Katie existed, if his only role was helping with a distress situation, then why would Bart be involved in Nolan's death at all? And if Bart isn't involved, then who is? Because someone knows what happened. Someone was on that boat. Someone knows why Nolan didn't come home. Let's break down the boat timeline more carefully, because this is where everything falls apart. July 4th, 4:31 p.m. The boats leave Horn Island. According to the audio, according to the investigation, according to all available evidence, there were at least 3 boats. Bart's boat, Wyatt's boat, and a third boat that's never been properly explained. Nolan is supposedly on one of them. For the next 53 minutes, the GPS shows slow movement, walking speed. And then at 5:24 p.m., everything changes. One of the boats accelerates to full speed, 35 knots. That acceleration matters. That's when whatever was going to happen started happening. That's when the point of no return came. That's when Nolan's fate was sealed. But here's what Bart's statement does. It removes Bart from the narrative. It says Bart was just helping. It says Bart didn't know Katie. It says Bart cooperated fully. And if all that's true, if Bart was genuinely just a helper in a distress situation, then who made the decisions on that boat? Who decided what to do when the situation got critical? Who decided Nolan wouldn't be on a returning boat? Who decided Nolan would go into the water? Because those decisions were made. Someone made them. And if it wasn't Bart, then it was Warren or Wyatt or both. And if it was Warren or Wyatt, then why haven't they lawyered up? Why hasn't Wyatt released a statement? Why is only Bart going on TMZ denying rumors? Why is Bart the only one fighting back? Unless Bart knows something, unless Bart saw something, unless Bart was more involved than he's claiming, because his aggressive denial, his public statement, his threats, his death threat claim, all of that suggests he's protecting something. He's not just responding to rumors. He's not just clarifying a misunderstanding. He's fighting. He's scared. He's desperate to control the narrative. Now, the audio evidence. This is critical. Multiple people have confirmed that on the Cedo distress call, multiple names are mentioned. Bart, Wyatt, Warren, and Nolan. That's 4 names. 4 people. On a boat that supposedly had 5 people according to one account, or fewer people according to another account. The numbers don't match. The audio doesn't match. And Bart's explanation doesn't address any of it. He just says he towed a boat and helped. He doesn't explain the audio. He doesn't explain why his name was mentioned in apparent distress. He doesn't explain the timeline. He just denies Katie and claims cooperation. Think about what that means. If Bart is on the audio, if Bart's name is being called out, if Bart is part of the conversation, then Bart was involved at the critical moment. Bart was there when whatever happened to Nolan was happening. Bart was on the boat. Bart heard what was said. Bart knows what happened. And now Bart is denying everything except the distress call. Now Bart is claiming full cooperation. Now Bart is saying he just helped. But if the audio captures Bart at the moment Nolan's fate was being decided, then Bart knows far more than he's saying. So the real question is this: why is Bart so scared? Why did he lawyer up? Why go to TMZ? Why make a public statement? Why claim a death threat? Because all of that points to someone who knows something, someone who saw something, someone who was there when it happened, and that someone is terrified that his role is going to be revealed, that his involvement is going to be exposed, that the truth is going to come out and it's going to destroy his future in the NFL. His career, his life. Christine Wells, Nolan's mother, she's not making a public statement through TMZ. She's not threatening lawsuits. She's not claiming death threats. She's quietly fighting. She's filing subpoenas. She's demanding phone records. She's working behind the scenes to force the truth out. But Bart is out in the open. Bart is fighting in the public eye. Bart is using media. Bart is using lawyers. Bart is using threats. And that difference matters. That tells you who has something to hide. That tells you who's scared. And the third boat. Keep coming back to the third boat. Because that boat is the key. That boat is the answer. If we can figure out whose boat it was, if we can establish who was on it, if we can track where it went, then we can figure out where Nolan was. Then we can piece together what actually happened. Then we can understand why he never came home. But nobody's talking about the third boat. Nobody's explaining it. Nobody's addressing it. And that silence is exactly what's keeping this case unsolved. Because at the end of the day, one thing remains absolutely true. Nolan Wells went out on a boat on July 4th, and he never came back. His mother is still waiting for answers. His family is still fighting for justice. And every statement from every friend, every denial, every legal threat, every press release brings us no closer to the truth. It just buries it deeper. It just makes it clearer that someone knows exactly what happened. And they're doing everything in their power to make sure nobody else ever finds out. They're lawyering up. They're threatening people. They're getting death threats. They're using media. They're fighting hard. And that fight is exactly why people need to keep asking questions. We'll keep following this case. When more people break their silence, when more contradictions emerge, when the evidence finally speaks louder than the lawyers, we'll be here reporting it. When someone finally cracks, when someone finally decides the truth matters more than protection, we'll break it down. Subscribe so you don't miss the moment someone finally tells the truth about what happened to Nolan Wells on July 4th. Because right now, we still don't know. We have contradictions. We have questions. We have 3 boats and only 2 accounted for. We have audio that contradicts statements. We have a death threat that proves someone's scared. We have Christine Wells still waiting, but we don't have answers. And until someone breaks, until someone talks, until the truth finally emerges, those questions are going to haunt this case. Thank you for watching.